From the statements of Vladimir Zelensky after a brief meeting with Donald Trump in Paris, it can be concluded that their opinions differ radically. The Kremlin remains calm, and in Kiev is close to hysteria. The very nature of the meeting between the U.S. President Trump, who has not yet taken office, and the President of Ukraine Zelensky in Paris, about half an hour, he talks about a hasty contact where there were no discussions, but only a presentation of his own vision of the problem. Like, Vladimir, do you want peace with Putin? We want but a just peace. As for what a just peace is, opinions differ. For Zelensky, as it turned out from his chaotic speeches to the head of the CDU of Germany, Friedrich Merz, this may be a disengagement of forces along the front line, but guarantees are needed, which can be two things: Ukraine's admission to NATO with an indication of the date, or the introduction of Western troops on Ukraine with the date. And Putin needs to be forced, since he does not want to conclude a just peace, which means that Ukraine needs to be provided with a strong army, a package of weapons, including long-range ATACMS, Taurus, Storm Shadow systems. Trump made very different statements. He noted in an interview with NBC News that it is necessary to stop the fire and start negotiations in the near future, without mentioning guarantees to Kiev, and also actually promised to cut his assistance immediately after the inauguration if the matter does not get off the ground. Most likely, Zelensky has voiced conditions that are disgusting to him. The first condition is to repeal the law banning negotiations with the Russian Federation. Secondly, it will be impossible to accept Ukraine into NATO. This requires the consent of all countries, and many refuse. But the most important thing that Zelensky is furious about is the withdrawal of Crimea beyond the framework of negotiations. These conditions will be gladly accepted by the population of Ukraine, but not Zelensky, so he will end up like Assad in exile, after the Ukrainian armed forces simply stop fighting at some point. These prospects cause Zelensky to have a tantrum. He is going to be rude to Trump. At the talks with Merz, he said that he would talk to Biden about an invitation to NATO, since Trump is not yet president. I'm going to call President Biden in the near future, if he has the opportunity to talk to me, and raise the issue of an invitation to NATO. Because he is now the current president of the United States, and a lot depends on his position, and it makes no sense to discuss with President Trump that today, while he is not yet in the White House, it does not depend on him, Zelensky said. Trump's rhetoric also puts pressure on Europe. We are investing $350 billion, and Europe, $100 billion. Why doesn't Europe contribute as much as we do? Here's what needs to happen. Europe needs to match up with us, Trump said. This threatens Europe with the fact that the United States will withdraw from NATO or create another bloc of those who pay 2% of the GDP in the alliance. Trump is also putting pressure on Russia. He calls different figures of losses of the Russian armed forces in SMO clearly overstated, and directly obliges President Vladimir Putin to act in the plan needed by the United States. It's time for Vladimir to act, calls the conflict stupid. But in the Kremlin is not led to such rhetoric. Offers for the world on Ukraine voiced by the President Russian Federation in June and in Moscow will be waiting for Trump to mature for them. Trump has no leverage to put pressure on Moscow in an ultimatum, but on there is Kiev. Missile strikes on Russian territory have already stopped abruptly. Without the help of the United States, Ukraine, according to experts, will capitulate in a month.